I absolutely love the beach more than anything. It's my happy place. It's where I go to get restored, energized, and relaxed. And so when I got the request to do a retreat at the Breakers Palm Beach, I was not mad. I said yes, and was really looking forward to the opportunity to relax and rejuvenate before and after my session. Unfortunately, this session coincided with the launch of the first major piece of media about my business. So I was getting profiled in a national women's magazine, and I knew that that profile was likely to come out, of course, the day of my retreat, which is how I found myself eating a cheeseburger with my left hand, holding my phone next to my ear with my left hand, and left shoulder, and typing with my right hand, eating, smushing bites in my mouth as I tried to navigate this conversation with my colleague. I don't say this story as an example of what you're supposed to do. I say it because it's an evolution. It's a process of burnout. It's not just a single destination where you have a nervous breakdown and lose your business. That's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about the progression, the ebb and flow of work, and of feelings that come up as an entrepreneur when navigating burnout. So we'll talk first about the agenda. We'll begin by defining burnout in your own life, then the case for slowing down, a little bit about the science behind it, and what works for you. So what this isn't, if you're looking for a listicle or life hacks, I suggest BuzzFeed. That's not what we're going to do here. There are lots of other great sessions. Go there. Next, it's not a silver bullet. You're not going to walk away from this as my cheeseburger in paradise example exhibits. You're not going to learn these strategies and suddenly never have to deal with burnout again. And it's also not a stage on the stage. I will not be standing up here providing all of my infinite wisdom with the expectation that you all take it home and master burnout. Instead, it's designed to be really interactive and self-reflective, to give you space to reflect about how burnout fits in your life and what it means to you. Finally, I always include this picture of my grandmother, first because she's adorable, and second because she always says, I'm happy to give you my advice as long as you promise not to take it. So I'm going to share these strategies with you, really built around the idea that you have to define burnout in your own life for these strategies to be effective. Getting started with part one, defining burnout in your own life. We'll get started with a song. So this is where the interactive part comes in. It could be that your experience of burnout right now is really intense. You are a little bit overwhelmed. You're feeling like you're maybe in a ring of fire. Maybe it's that you still haven't found what you're looking for. You're striving to connect with your relationship with burnout and have a healthier work-life balance, but you haven't quite gotten there yet. Perhaps you're feeling good. You've got some good vibrations. Or you're dazed and confused. You're a little stressed out and not sure what to do about it. Or after this session, maybe the best is yet to come. So reflect for a moment about what your experience with burnout is. It doesn't have to be one of these songs. And then I would love to hear from someone in the audience what their perspective is at this moment. Okay, who wants to share out? Just shout it out. Or, I mean, you can use the mic. Yeah. Like a hybrid between dazed and confused, and I still haven't found what I'm looking for. So a transitional period. Hopefully this session helps. Who else? Yeah. So burnout from specific industry-specific stuff. So there's specific aspects of your job that are frustrating you or exhausting you more specifically. What else? Any other song lyrics that come to mind when you reflect about your experience with burnout? Yeah. Can you shout it out loud and proud? The best is yet to come. Perfect. So we're still working on it. We're optimistic that the best is yet to come. Fantastic. So as we're thinking about defining burnout for the purposes of our time together, stress and resilience expert, I love that that's a job title, Paula Davis-Lack says, it's the chronic state of being out of sync with one or more aspects of your life and the resulting loss of energy or exhaustion that comes with it. So as we're thinking about burnout as a shared definition, this is one we can use, but I encourage you all to think about it in your own lives as well. So what factors contribute to burnout? As you consider when you've experienced burnout, what are the causes of burnout in your life? This is the interactive part again. Yeah. Lack of delegation. So you're feeling like you have to do it all, that all the responsibilities are yours. Yeah. So the balance of too much to do and not enough time. I'm seeing some applause from other sides, and we can't quite see one another. What else? External demands, so outside of work perhaps. Yeah, so competing demands on your time. Yeah. An ever-changing landscape. So I'm trying to manage my priorities, but they're constantly shifting, and it's hard to know what's next and how to manage them. Yeah, 2 more. Yeah, the exhaustion of trying to push someone else to do what they're supposed to do. Have you ever had that experience where you're sitting waiting for someone else's email and you look like the person who doesn't have their stuff together? Because you're waiting for somebody else and there's only so much prodding you can do, right? 1 more. Yeah. That was a stretch. So exhaustion, we'll call that exhaustion, just stretching out, tired, lack of sleep. So certainly the contributing factors can include the things that we've talked about. Also, have you ever heard the expression shoulding yourself? It sounds a little bit like an expletive, but it's not. So it's this idea that we're thinking about what we should be doing, often at the expense of what we realistically can do. If I'm sitting there and looking at someone else's business and saying, oh my gosh, she's already got her e-course up, she's already got these great retreats and energizing experiences for women, and I'm not even off the ground yet, I'm going to be already second-guessing myself and telling myself a story that's really negative about what I'm capable of. It could be I should be working more, or I should be spending more time with my family, or both. These might feel familiar. I'm seeing some knowing nods from the audience. It could also be that your identity is connected to your business. So often, professionals end up having their identity connected to the work they do. So people who work in nonprofits, people who work for a major corporation who say, I'm really tied to my identity as an employee of such and such. This is even more true of entrepreneurs who have put so much of our time and energy into creating this business from nothing. So for entrepreneurs, our identity is even more attached to the success or failure or coasting or uncertainty of our business. Next, and this is one of my favorites, I hope you can see this gerbil ball, because I've got that included. The workload is too much, too complex, or too urgent. So that's one of the things that someone referenced, right? That there's just too much to do and not enough time to do it. I had a client once tell me that she was moving so quickly that she couldn't manage all of the demands on her time, and everything was just moving by her in a blur. She knew she was moving really, really quickly, but she didn't know if she was moving forward. This gerbil ball analogy perfectly captures that, right? You're caught in this little plastic ball, you're running as fast as you can, but you're not sure where you're going. You don't have any control over velocity or direction. And finally, it could be work FOMO. What does FOMO mean? Fear of missing out. That may feel more familiar for the younger people in the audience, but the application really comes to entrepreneurship when we think about the exhaustion that can come into play when we feel like we have to be attached to our computer, when we feel like we can't let our phone out of our sight because that one last email is going to come through and the client's going to find another contractor if we don't answer it right away. So what factors contribute for you the most? This is a time for reflection. You can write it down. You can just think for a moment. But I'm going to give you a moment to reflect about it in your own life and what factors are impacting you right now and more generally. Don't worry, I won't call on you. So now let's talk about symptoms. How do you know that you're getting burnt out? What are the things that you notice about your behavior, about your feelings, about your body when you're getting close to feeling burnt out? Say that again? Yeah, I'll get back to it. The feeling like you're always pushing things away, that you've always got more responsibility. What else? not a happy person. And that might translate in different ways, right? I'm not a happy person might come out as, I am really snippy with my partner. Or, my mom calls and says something nice, and I'm like, Mom, I gotta go. That feel familiar? My mom's here. Hi, Mom. What else? Yeah. Headaches? Yeah, so physical exhaustion can evoke a physical response. You could get headaches, you could get lower back pain, you get physical discomfort as a manifestation of all of the overexertion that you're doing. What else? Isolating yourself, yeah. So one way to think about it is isolating yourself that you just have no energy. Another is that you're pushing yourself really hard and you're constantly surrounded by people. It looks different for each person. For me, I'm an extrovert, and so I can find myself constantly engaging with people and constantly going to one more happy hour. And then I find myself really burnt out. But I find myself, it's hard if I keep pushing to recognize that as a symptom of burnout when it can feel like, oh no, I'm doing a fun thing. Or on the other side of isolation, oh, I'm just dealing with self-care. I'm just, slowing down. But that isolation might be really a representation of burnout. What else comes to mind as you think about factors or symptoms, rather, of burnout? Say that again? The laundry never comes off the chair. Oh my goodness. So I was talking to an attorney. That's a very good one. I was talking to a female attorney who said, the difference for you, she was talking to her husband, is you have a magic underwear drawer. Every time you want a new pair of underwear, there is just folded, clean underwear in the drawer. And for me, I am the one who is behind the magic underwear drawer. So when I'm stressed, no one in my house has underwear. And that's how I know that I'm close to burnout. Not the division of domestic labor in my home is exactly the opposite. My husband does the laundry. It's great. What else? Starting to second guess yourself. Say that last part again. So I'm having trouble hearing you. Next time, I'd love for you to speak up if you don't mind using the mic. I just can't quite hear you with the lights in my face. The feeling, the pressure to do everything right. God. So the self-doubt that comes up as an entrepreneur. Raise your hand if you identify as an entrepreneur yourself. Yeah, so a good part of the audience. For the folks who are professionals, this applies as well. When we think about entrepreneurship and we think about being a working professional, often there's just more work to do because of email, because of the responsive nature of communication. It used to be when you left work for the day, you were done. It would be really rude or an emergency if someone called your house phone during dinner. I barely remember this. But for us now, we're constantly connected to our devices, and so it can feel like there's a constant pressure to be on top of it and to not make mistakes. And the mistakes for me, when I'm burnt out, I'll send all kinds of mistakes. I sent an email recently that said the 23rd of March. That's not the date. 23rd would be appropriate. And it went out to like 50 people. And so then it can be harder to bounce back also, right? So you make the typo, you make the small mistake, and then you find yourself ruminating on it and second-guessing yourself. I'll take one more. Any other symptoms of burnouts? Ways that we know, yeah. So your bandwidth becomes, your threshold becomes lower. I call this emotional bandwidth. My ability to deal with just the regular stuff of life is lowered. So it could be that I get a crack in the windshield, which happened 2 days ago. It's no big deal. This happens all the time. If I were in a place where I was getting close to burnout, that would be maybe overwhelming. Like I have to call my insurance company, figure out what they'll cover, figure out if it's a crack that's bigger than $1 bill, and then I have to go get the windshield replaced and all of that, and that could feel really overwhelming. Because I'm dealing with my orientation around work and burnout, it's like, okay, I can deal with this. This isn't that big of a deal. Yeah. One of the things that we didn't talk about is reliance on alcohol. Sometimes there's a irritability or numbness that comes from burnout. These are symptoms that scientists have identified. And one of the ways that this can manifest is the desire to numb out, the desire to say, I am just going to disconnect. I know some of us were here for Katrina, and that may have been the exhaustion of managing all of the responsibilities may have resulted in relying on alcohol, and certainly in New Orleans, there's ample access to alcohol, and sometimes we don't notice it. As I mentioned, we could have a happy hour every night, and it's no big deal to have a drink, two drinks, then 3 drinks, and then suddenly I'm drinking every night, and that's something that we can be aware of as we're considering our relationship with burnout. This is Bitmoji me. This is what I look like when I'm burnt out. I've actually sent this to a friend who said, oh, can we talk? I have a negotiation coming up. Can we jump on the phone? And I was like, I love you. Here are some free resources. This is me right now. You don't want me. My e-courses are going to be much more helpful than me in person right now. So that exhaustion can leave you feeling just like you've got nothing left to give. Now, I'm going to read from this slide. I don't usually do that, but it's too good to pass up. I don't know if y'all can read it, but this is from my friend Kelly Williams Brown, who created a flow chart called the Late Night Worry Game as a part of her book, Adulting, Becoming a Grown-Up in 468 Easy-ish Ways. I definitely recommend it. So the first part is start. Feel anxious that you can't sleep. Then you decide that since you're anxious already about not sleeping, now might be a good time to also be anxious about something else. Something that absolutely cannot be fixed in the middle of the night, like the state of the newspaper industry and what this means for your career prospects. Get carried away to other similarly unfixable worries like, why are you so bad with money? Rehash conversations of the day and think how they could have gone better, all aboard the neurosis train. Repeat until 5 a.m., then fall asleep for an hour and wake up feeling groggy and confused. Maybe I'm not worried about the state of the newspaper industry, but there is plenty I can worry about in my business. Does this feel familiar? Yeah, we've all had that experience. So consider what symptoms impact you most. As an extrovert, it's this constant connection with other people. But consider for you personally, what are the factors, the symptoms that resonate most? All right, the case for slowing down, the science behind the things that we maybe already know. So what's the strangest place that you've had an aha moment or a sudden breakthrough in your business or professional life? Where were you when you weren't sitting at your desk, but you had this light bulb go off? Running, yeah. I know a mathematician who says, I was trying to solve a geometric proof and I couldn't figure it out. So I went for a run, and it came to me. Confounding to me. I don't understand that at all, but great, yeah. Walking my dog. So walking out of the space that you're normally in, that you're normally doing the work. Yeah. On an airplane. Oh, I love airplane thinking. I love writing on airplanes, just getting into a completely different space, and it used to be not having Wi-Fi. What else? Yeah. In the shower, it's one of my favorites. So I have an attorney friend who says, I do a deep condition when I'm trying to think through a complex legal matter, that's her strategy. Where else? Yeah. A nap. Yes, absolutely. So just turning your brain off completely and going into another mode physiologically. Yeah. So this is a bunch of vegetables, because I have a dear friend in the audience who is one of the most effective, productive, and efficient people I know. And she spends her weekends sorting tomatoes at the farmer's market because she can turn her brain off. This is not, this experience is not unique to the people in this room. Myron Scholes is a Nobel Prize-winning economist. And when they called him to tell him he had won the Nobel Prize, he wasn't in his office. He was about to go out for a game of golf. He had just given a lecture, and he was off for a day of relaxation. People call this man an absolute genius in his field. And it's not because he spends hours and hours toiling away in his office. What he attributes his success to is meditation and taking walks. So it's interesting because being idle and letting your mind wander is actually the optimal state for creative problem solving. So in a study called Give Your Ideas Some Legs, people who had just gone for a walk or were on a walk scored higher on a variety of creativity tests. The cognitive psychologist Scott Barry Kaufman talks about even just a 15-minute break can help you make new connections between ideas that aren't possible when you are fully focused on a problem. begs the question, why don't we do it? I doubt that maybe you've heard of those specific studies, but it may have felt familiar that there were options in terms of work and productivity, and that taking breaks was beneficial. How many of you, this is totally new information, you didn't know that taking breaks was helpful? Right, but we knew that, so why don't we do it? Back to the interactive part. Not enough time. So we'll go back to my cheeseburger in paradise analogy, right? I'm sitting up there at the Breakers Palm Beach. It is positively gorgeous. And the three things that I knew needed to happen were I needed to give my colleague Jen approval on a couple pieces of information so that if the story went live, she was ready to go and she knew her next steps. I needed to read through the website copy to be sure it was exactly how I wanted it formatted, and I needed to feed myself. Those are three things that I felt had to happen concurrently 30 minutes before my workshop. Had I taken a break then, maybe not the best time. But there's so many more moments when we actually do have an option, but we're not aware. That we're so focused. Even last night, I was working and my husband said, why don't you take a break? And it was only because I was literally preparing for this presentation. And he said, why don't you take a break? And it hadn't occurred to me because I was so immersed in my line of thinking that it was hard for me to disconnect. So what I always suggest is you can set a timer, you can get an accountability buddy. I love going on walks instead of sitting down at coffee. So I've taken to Audubon Park or City Park for many of my meetings. But connecting to the ways that we can separate ourselves from our office space. Why else don't we do it? It feels lazy. Yeah, we have all these messages that for me to be working, I need to be sitting at my computer. We can spend all of our time looking at glowing rectangles, and we'll exhaust ourselves. Why else? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Who here uses Facebook as a break? Facebook, listicles, the internet more generally. Does it feel like a break after? Do you feel restored and relaxed? Do you feel like maybe you have a little more business envy? Like, she's got a Facebook ad. I should get a Facebook ad. That definitely resonates for me. So taking breaks when we're still sitting at our computer, it doesn't feel like a break, so maybe we're wondering if it counts. But it looks like we're being productive. Something I haven't heard is the impression that we're giving others. If we're the boss and we're going out for a walk, what kind of example does that set? But if we look at the cognitive psychology data, it actually sets a really good example. I have a client who includes, does anyone use Harvest, the time tracker app? So the time tracker app allows us to categorize the types of time we're spending, the ways that we're spending our time. And I have one client who uses blue sky thinking time as an option for all of her employees. She says up to 20% of your time can be spent not engaging on a specific client and not working on a specific issue that we've provided you discreetly. You can say, you know, I've got some blue sky thinking time about X. I just wanted to go for a walk and give my mind some space to reflect. So now we're going to talk about what works for you. We're going to do an exercise, and if you don't have a notebook, that's just fine. Maybe pull out your phone. But this exercise is designed to say, if I know nothing else about myself, I know these three qualities. What are the three qualities that are most important to your identity, to the work that you do, and to how you see yourself? For me, these three qualities are that I'm of service, that I'm generous of self and concerned about giving to others, that I'm empathetic and intelligent, that I'm investing my time and energy in others. I'll give you all a moment to reflect about the three qualities when you're in flow, when you're feeling like your best self. What are the three qualities that resonate most for you? Give you another 30 seconds. Now we're going to come to the slightly less pleasant part of the exercise where we list the opposite of those values. For me, it's being self-serving, unintelligent, and indifferent. Take a moment, draw an arrow, and write the opposite of each of those initial 3 values. How did it feel to write those 3rd values? Stinky. What else? Do you ever find yourself thinking of yourself in those qualities? Telling yourself a story about how, in my instance, self-serving, unintelligent, and indifferent I am? I'll tell another story. I recently met with a new prospective client. He had come to me, and I was elated about the prospect of working with his business and the work that he was doing specifically. I did a 2-hour prospecting meeting where I took about 20 pages of notes. I put all of that into a proposal and left feeling completely energized. I felt really sure of myself, sure of the relationship, confident that I demonstrated these qualities that I find so important, that I was of service, that I was invested in helping him, that I demonstrated new ideas and new approaches, that I was intelligent, and that I was empathetic, that I really listened and heard where he was coming from and the challenges he was facing in his business. I came home, I wrote a really great proposal. I spent a ton of time on it, had a couple people look at it to be sure it met all of the criteria that I wanted, and I sent it off. And then I followed up. And then I followed up again. And then I followed up 2 more times, and I never heard back. So 0 times did he respond to any of my correspondence. I left this meeting feeling like I had been ghosted, like we had gone on a really great Tinder date, and I was really optimistic, and it had gone really well, and I was like, man, I'm gonna tell my mom about this guy. Like, this could really be it. And yet, here we are, 0 correspondence. So I left the meeting feeling amazing, feeling like I had all of these ideas, and really, in the shower washing my hair, had all of these ideas about how I could work with his company and how I could make a difference in the problems that he had brought to me. When I didn't hear from him, I was able to tell myself all kinds of stories about what his experience of my 2-hour scoping session had been. That maybe he didn't think I had good ideas. Maybe he thought I was unintelligent. Maybe he thought I was indifferent or uninvested or unengaged. And I had all of these stories I was telling myself about the work that I thought he perceived me to be doing. So as we're thinking about the way that the stories we tell ourselves as entrepreneurs and as professionals can impact our experience, I share this anecdote and I share this exercise so that we can be aware of when the inner critic is taking over. So the idea that you have is everyone familiar with the idea of an inner critic? It's maybe that mean clay teacher in 7th grade who told you again and again that your stuff wasn't good. It could be a parent. It could be manifestation of all the different people who have ever said anything negative about you. Or it could be yourself just being really hypercritical. And that inner critic voice can come out when we're burned out, when we're completely exhausted, when, as we talked about earlier, that our threshold is low, or our emotional bandwidth, our ability to deal with all of the things that are coming our way. When that's diminished, when we're exhausted, for me at least, and for most of my clients, that inner critic comes out loudest when I have no reserve, when I'm completely exhausted. So as we're thinking about strategies to avoid burnout and to navigate around burnout, one of the things I encourage all clients to do is to take a beat when you hear that inner critic taking over. As you think about other strategies that you've employed in the past or are currently employing, what comes to mind? Oh, sorry, God, how did I forget? This is my favorite slide. You could be having an identity crisis. Meow. See, it's a cow. So the cow is a perfect representation. Maybe you can picture this cow saying meow when you're struggling with that inner critic who's getting really loud.